We begin with that high-stakes runoff in Georgia.
Yeah, this morning, after days of record early voting turnout, voters are heading to the polls one more time to decide on the runoff between incumbent U.S. Senator Raphael Warnock and his Republican challenger Herschel Walker. More than 1.8 million mail and early in-person ballots have already been cast, potentially giving Warnock an edge, while Walker is banking on turnout today to take the lead.
Get out and vote, because if you don't vote, you're going to get more Chuck Schumer and also President Biden.
We know that he is unprepared. We know he's unqualified. He's unfit to represent the people of Georgia in the United States Senate.
We have full team coverage of today's crucial election on the ground with NBC News correspondent Tremaine Lee and senior political reporter for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, Greg Bluestein. Good morning to both of you. And Tremaine, starting off with you, if you could take us through the state of the race and where do we stand on Election Day, what both candidates are going to do today.
That's right, Stephen. You mentioned that heavy early vote turnout, which favored Democrats. But both of these candidates, Senator Warnock and Herschel Walker, are hoping for a heavy turnout today. As you can see behind me, there's already a line gathering at this polling place. It's kind of a cold, wet, and rainy day. But both of these candidates are hoping for heavy turnout. Reverend Warnock, because he says the fight's not over until it's over, so he wants everyone to still come out, even though they feel good with the momentum they have. But Herschel Walker is hoping that those Republicans who might not have voted early, they tend not to. They tend to show up the day of Election Day. He's hoping that they turn out. And so both of these men are out doing meet and greets and canvassing in the suburbs of Atlanta today. But again, the polls just opened. There's already a line behind me. And it's exactly what these candidates are hoping for.
So, Greg, of course, this is not the first time Georgia has been at the center of a high-stakes runoff election. What are you watching for today?
I'm watching for Election Day turnout. It's so huge, as we just heard. It seems like Senator Warnock built a solid advantage in early voting. That's because more voters in Democratic strongholds voted than in Republican strongholds, and a disproportionately high number of African-American voters cast ballots, and they tend to back Democrats overwhelmingly. And so Republicans are relying on huge Election Day turnout today. Herschel Walker, if he doesn't get a surge of turnout at the polls, he does not win.
So, Tremaine, unlike 2020, this is not a race where the fate of the Senate is on the line, but there were more than 77,000 new voters, people who did not vote in November, who did turn out for the runoff. So what do you think is motivating people this time around to show up when they didn't just a couple months ago?
You know, I've been talking to a number of organizers who say that, you know what, the stakes were so high that they had to pull out all the stops, right? The machinery and apparatus of voting, especially here in Georgia, which is kind of ground zero for this kind of mobilization, that folks are making the message clear that the stakes are too high to stay home. Now, Republicans are hoping that those folks, again, who might not have showed up before, that they show up today without Governor Kemp on the ticket, which, you know, drew a lot of Republicans out. It may be tough for them, but again, the stakes are so high in this election. Even without the balance of power, clear, the Democrats could get a clear majority if Senator Warnock retains his seat, and that's what they're hoping for.
And it just looks so uncomfortable right there, Tremaine. We see people in line behind you, like you mentioned. So, Greg, early voting traditionally has favored Democrats. As we've heard, Senator Warnock has held a very narrow lead in many of the polls. So what does Herschel Walker have to do to actually flip that seat?
Well, he's trying to drive up that Election Day turnout itself. He's now trying to make the case that this race is a referendum on Joe Biden, is a referendum on Democratic control of the U.S. Senate. He said at his final campaign stop last night that a vote for Senator Warnock is a vote for Chuck Schumer, is a vote for Joe Biden. That's a case that he's struggled to make in recent weeks. He's instead focused more on culture war issues, transgender sports, gendered pronouns, issues like that are motivating to some in the far-right base, but aren't as appealing to the middle-of-the-road voters, that he frankly lost a big number of them in the November midterm. We saw 200,000 fewer voters back him than Governor Brian Kemp, his fellow Republican, in that November midterm. And so Senator Warnock, he is making a clear and sustained appeal to those swing voters by saying that he can work across party lines, that he can work with Republicans and, of course, with Democrats as well. Herschel Walker, he wants to nationalize this race and make it all about Joe Biden and his 40% or so approval rating here in Georgia.
It'll be interesting to see whose strategy pays off today. Tremaine, Greg, thank you.
Thank you.
And sticking with politics and the ongoing controversy surrounding former President Trump, Republican lawmakers are being put on the spot, forced to take a stance about a recent Trump post on social media where he called for abolishing certain parts of the Constitution. NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Ryan Nobles has the story.
The Republican Party once again forced to answer uncomfortable questions about Donald Trump.
So I vehemently disagree with the statement that Trump has made.
The party's only announced candidate for president and the GOP's de facto leader proposing on his Truth Social channel that parts of the Constitution should be terminated to allow the 2020 election to be overturned. Trump's claims of widespread election fraud are baseless, but he argues that, quote, a massive fraud of this type and magnitude allows for the termination of all rules and regulations and articles, even those found in the Constitution. Our great founders did not want, would not condone false and fraudulent elections. It is a position some Republican leaders were forced to navigate.
Well, obviously, I don't support that. The Constitution is set for a reason, to protect the rights of every American. And so I certainly don't endorse that language or that sentiment.
While some, like Congressman-elect Mike Lawler, were able to distance themselves from the former president, other Republican leaders, like Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell and the House Republican leader Kevin McCarthy, have yet to respond, despite repeated asks of their offices. Trump walking back his words with the following statement. The fake news is actually trying to convince the American people that I said I wanted to terminate the Constitution. This is simply more disinformation and lies. John Bolton, the former national security advisor under Trump, now one of his critics, speaking out with harsh words for his former boss.
It's not merely wrong and outrageous. It is disqualifying.
This just the latest in a long line of controversy that continues to surround the former president since he announced his intention to run for president again.
I am tonight announcing my candidacy for president of the United States.
It was less than a month ago that Trump was dining with rapper Kanye West and a white nationalist, Nick Fuentes. Trump has yet to apologize for hosting the pair, and just days after their dinner, Ye, as he is now known, went on Alex Jones's InfoWars to declare his admiration for Hitler. Thursday night, Trump expressing solidarity with January 6th insurrectionists in a fundraising video.
People have been treated unconstitutionally, in my opinion, and very, very unfairly. And we're going to get to the bottom of it.
While Trump remains the most prominent member of the GOP, there are signs even some of his Republican supporters may be open to other nominees.
I just don't think that at this point he'll be able to get there because I think there's a lot of other good quality candidates out there.
And the new Democratic leader, Hakeem Jeffries, warning Republicans that Trump is only part of their problem.
The Republicans are going to have to work out their issues with the former president and decide whether they're going to break from him and return to some semblance of reasonableness.
Our thanks to Ryan Nobles for that report. And in a statement Sunday, White House spokesman Andrew Bates said that attacking the Constitution was anathema to the soul of our nation and should be universally condemned.
And all of this is playing out as the House is back in session this morning, trying to tackle key funding issues before the end of the year. Lawmakers are fast approaching deadlines for several pieces of must-pass legislation, including government funding and defense spending. But the question is, will they be able to get anything done in this lame duck session? NBC News reporter Julie Sirkin joins us now with more on this. Julie, good morning to you. So let's start with keeping the government's lights on. Pretty important. Congress funding deadline is coming up on December 16th, but some Republicans want to delay it until next year so the new Congress can have more input in all of this. So how likely is it that they're able to hash out a funding deal during the lame duck session? And what options do they have if they actually miss that deadline?
Yeah, good morning. Well, look, the bad news is the government funding deadline is literally 10 days away. But the good news is we often find ourselves in this position when it comes to December, that end of the year deadline, because both sides are often pushing their work until the last minute. And that's because both sides have something to gain if they stretch out the process longer and longer. So if the past years are indicative of what's going to happen this year, they will likely get it together. And that's in large part because leaders on the Democratic side and on the Republican side want to get this done. There is virtually no appetite for a shutdown. There's no appetite even to kick this to next Congress, although there are some Republicans that you mentioned, especially in the House, that are looking to do this because, of course, Republicans are going to take control of the House next Congress. But look, the bottom line here is both sides in leadership want to get this done. I was talking to senators last night. They're trading numbers back and forth. Leader Schumer told me walking out of a meeting with McConnell that things are moving along. They're still working. They're not there yet, but they're hoping to be there soon. And I should also note they are still $25 billion apart, but we're looking to see if that could shake out in the next coming days.
All right, let's talk about the defense budget, Julie. It's a major point of contention on Capitol Hill. A group of Republicans want to use that bill to end a COVID vaccine mandate for service members, and they've threatened to stall that bill if the mandate is not repealed. How do we see this all playing out?
Yeah, there was a press conference last week with some of those Republican members, including Rand Paul, who I should note never really votes for the NDA, that defense bill that Congress needs to pass. But there is a separate effort that's been moving over the last couple of months that I reported on yesterday of a group of Republicans in the Armed Services Committees pushing to end this mandate for service members. It's something the Biden administration put in. It's something they're still saying is a readiness issue. They're advocating for the mandate to stay in place, of course. But yesterday, some things kind of fell apart. I was talking to some of the top Republicans and Democrats, including on the Armed Services Committee. Senator Inhofe, for example, who's the top Republican on the Senate Armed Services Committee, told me that Democrats are putting in extraneous last-minute asks in order to get this vaccine mandate, sort of a tit-for-tat going on here that we normally see in the last couple of weeks before the Congress ends. But all things said, the National Defense Bill is a must-pass bill. There is virtually no appetite for that not to pass either. I mean, it's literally something they need to get done to keep our military running, to keep our partners overseas funded as well. Ukraine, a great example of that. So we expect this also to be solved, but not without a political fight and exceedingly political tensions.
It seems like nothing happens without a political fight these days. And Julie, speaking of things that are pending, the January 6th committee also preparing a report for a December 31st deadline. Do we have any insight on what we might learn from that?
Yeah, it's a great question. When the House was last in on Friday, I was chasing the halls with my colleagues, trying to get an answer to that, talking to members on the committee, and they were still coming out of a meeting. I mean, they are literally deciding as we speak how to present this, when to present this, perhaps criminal referrals. Of course, the number one question on the minds of many is whether they plan to make any to the Department of Justice. Former President Trump, the number one name, of course, that they are considering in that. But look, they have until the end of the year. They know that. So they plan to present in some way. We plan to see them again, I'm told, by the end of the year. This report, we don't know what setting that will be in, but all signs are pointing to some kind of meeting, some kind of presentation they plan to have before they hit the expiration date on their committee.
A lot to pay attention to. All right, Julie, thank you.
And more than 30,000 customers in North Carolina are still without power this morning, days after two major power stations were seriously damaged in what officials are calling a targeted attack. The lights in Moore County aren't expected to come back on for days. A state of emergency is in effect as investigators race to find a motive. NBC News correspondent Antonia Hilton joins us now from outside of the sheriff's office in Carthage, North Carolina, with more. Antonia, good morning. So we know the FBI has joined in on the investigation, but what else do we know this morning? And are you hearing anything about a possible motive or who might be involved?
Morning, Zincle. Right now, we still have no information about a motive and no suspect. And this is as we're now at the third consecutive morning with people waking up without heat in their homes, in many cases without running water, and without a school for their kids to be able to go to right now. And so residents are really frustrated as there's sort of two tracks to the story now, Zincle. One about this community trying to get back on its feet after being destabilized by all of this, and the other piece being this investigation. This is what we do know from authorities, that this is an intentional attack, that they believe that there was criminal intent here from the individual or individuals involved. And they repeatedly use the word intention and then phrasing like this is a person who knew what they were doing. In other words, not a group of teenagers just pulling an accidental prank. They emphasize that whoever did this very much knew what they were doing that night and knew what the resulting consequences would look like. And of course, residents here and really people around the country are keeping an eye on this closely because of the concerns about what this might represent for our infrastructure more broadly and the vulnerabilities that might be there, Zincle.
Absolutely, and it's not lost on me that this is happening in December when it's already so cold. And Antonia, North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper has also spoken out about this attack. What exactly did he have to say, and how is he helping residents that still, as you said, don't have power, don't have heat this morning?
Well, first, the most important thing for people to know is if you're in this area in Moore County and your home is cold, you need help or resources, the county has set up a shelter and is encouraging people to take advantage of that. They're also still responding to emergency calls. You know, this is a community with a lot of elderly people who depend on things like oxygen to be connected. And the county is still sending people out and helping residents when those issues come up. But the Governor Roy Cooper, really focused on this question of infrastructure and some of the national implications here. You know, the governor said that for a long time he's been aware of potential security threats, cybersecurity threats, and threats to our infrastructure, and said that likely, you know, as we learn more about the motive in this case, that is going to mean that additional security measures are going to have to be taken in communities like Moore and around the rest of the state to make sure that something like this doesn't happen again. Take a listen to some of his remarks.
What happened here Saturday night was a criminal attack. Regardless of motive, violence and sabotage will not be tolerated.
There are multiple layers of law enforcement involved on the ground here, from the FBI to the State Bureau of Investigation and, of course, the Sheriff's Office behind me here. And we expect to hear more potentially this afternoon around 4 p.m. Zinkley.
I mean, we'll be waiting for that. And Antonia, briefly, what are some of the major concerns that local officials have over these outages?
Well, first, people's safety and security, because it has gotten cold at night here. It's not quite freezing temperatures today, but it's been down close to 30 and 32 at night on other days. And that poses a serious risk for the elderly people in this community, for the littlest people in our community, you know, people's infants and young toddlers trying to get through this. They don't even have schools to go to. As you drive around this community, traffic lights aren't working. And so there have been concerns about potential car crashes. That's part of the reason why there's a 9 p.m. curfew in place here. So I think safety and security and people, you know, having food to eat, gas in their tanks, and the resources that they need in place is the top concern of people here while they're still trying to figure out the motive here. Zinkley.
Absolutely. Hoping people stay safe. Antonia Hilton, thank you.
Emmy-winning actor Kirstie Alley has died of cancer, according to her family. Alley rose to fame after her breakout role as bar manager Rebecca in the NBC comedy Cheers. She went on to star alongside her friend John Travolta in the Look Who's Talking movies. More recently, she competed on Dancing with the Stars in 2011, and earlier this year was on The Masked Singer. Kirstie Alley was 71 years old.
She'll be missed. And now to your weather this morning.
Meteorologist Michelle Grossman joins us with a check of our forecast. Good to see you, Michelle.
Great to see you both. And we are tracking some rain today. Some of it is heavy, some of it will be heavy, and we could see the potential for some flash flooding, not only today, but also tomorrow. And you can see on satellite radar, most of the east is covered by rain, and we're seeing those pockets of more moderate rainfall. That's where you see those brighter colors. So portions of Georgia and the South Carolina, Tennessee, also North Carolina, and even a little isolated moderate rain up in upstate New York. So we're going to see rounds of showers, rounds of rain today, and also tomorrow. That's going to pose the impact or pose a threat for flash flooding in portions of the lower Tennessee Valley, the lower Mississippi Valley, into portions of the southern Appalachians. So that's satellite radar over the past 6 hours. It's all due to a warm front that's moving through. It's moving very slowly. It's bringing that heavy rain. It's bringing the potential for that flash flooding. And that rain is now expanding into the mid-Atlantic and also the Northeast. Now, we're not expecting the heaviest rain in the Northeast or the mid-Atlantic. Most of that will be in the lower Tennessee Valley and also the Mississippi Valley. And then tomorrow, we're going to remain unsettled as well. Another cloudy and damp day in the Northeast. That lingering front is going to fuel more storms in the Southeast. By Thursday, the next round of soaking rain moves into the Midwest. And we're going to see high rainfall rates. That's going to lead to more flooding. It's going to be saturated. The ground's going to be saturated. So we're going to be watching this very closely over the next several days. Locally, we could see 3 to 5 inches of rain, especially where you see those yellows and oranges. That's extending into the Ohio Valley as well. And then we do have pockets of isolated moderate rainfall amounts expected in the Northeast as well. Along with that rainfall, we are warm in many spots in the east. Temperatures in December near 80 degrees in Montgomery, Alabama. That's 15 degrees above normal for this time of year. Into the mid-70s in Dallas, even into the low to mid-50s in D.C. Boston, you're warm too, 53 degrees. We'll hold on to that warmth tomorrow, 59 degrees in New York City, 13 degrees above normal for this time of year. But then we cool it down by the weekend, back to reality, into the 40s by Saturday. Back to you guys.
Back to reality.
Yeah, that is the word for it. All right, Michelle, thank you.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.